Panel of experts on leading technology in the legal space at LegalTech New York 2012, and I want to ask the question to the panel, what do you think is the most important thing that the audience should take away today based on the discussion about technology in the legal space? So why don't we start with our moderator, Steve Mann.
Thanks. Well, I think that the most important takeaway for the organization, for the people that were here today, was that the successful utilization of technology is as much a change management issue as it is an implementation issue, and that you've got to find the early adopters in the organization and get them to infect the others with the utilization of this technology, number one. Number two, finding the right liaison mechanism between the business part of the organization and the technology component of the organization. Those two things, I think, are critical for a successful utilization of technology.
Thanks, Steve. Let's go to the other Steve on the panel, Stephen Levy.
Well, I think that was a big part of it. Having a richer and more equitable conversation among IT, legal, and finance, all three players have to be in there, I think is critical to moving technology forward in the legal department. And given that IT is not likely to initiate that conversation at many companies, and finance is not likely to initiate that conversation, then I think it becomes incumbent on legal to begin to have that conversation, to drive that conversation, and to expend the time, resources, and lose some ego to have a good conversation and a sharing of needs and mutual understanding.
Thank you. David, do you have comments?
I think we were talking also a little bit about Generation X and Generation Y and whether they're relating to each other. I think right now law firms are so concentrated on trying to get and keep the business that they have that they're not paying that much attention to Generation Z and how Generation Z can help transform them. So again, those are the people that will help be the change agents that create that conversation, that show the success stories, that the success stories need to get out there so that the law firms can see somebody else is doing this better than us, and we need to get to that too. Right now, they're all kind of cautiously waiting and looking around to see who's doing what and should we do that too. But they need to see some people move forward in order to want to move forward themselves.
Thanks, David. Nikki, do you have thoughts?
One thing that I think there was a lot of interest in cloud computing, and I think that that's a trend in the legal community in general because cloud computing is becoming ubiquitous. And I think that one of the things that we talked about was that cloud computing is it's a difficult proposition for law firms because of a lot of the security and privacy risks, and a lot of the ethics commissions have not yet really handed down decisions, and it's a little bit in flux, and so we're waiting to see what happens with that. And there's also a bit of a pushback from IT in terms of whether cloud computing should be implemented, because in some ways cloud computing threatens their jobs. So there's a lot of issues around cloud computing and balancing the benefits and the risks, and I think that over the next year or two, it'll start to settle in law firms to begin to use it more often the way that the general population now is.
Thanks, Nikki. And John, certainly last but not least, love to hear any comments you have.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is technology is still moving at the speed of light, and it's the adoption that's taking a while to catch up, especially amongst the generations. And so at some point we're going to have to be able to bridge that gap with the generations and those who are bringing that technology to light and making sure that it can be used to its rightful value that it can bring for organizations as well as for law firms, though, too. It's got to go back to people and the assets, though, too. So we're finding that we got to break down those silos of people who've been technically in one area and not cross-trained. And so we've got to start affecting change more with the people to help with that adoption of the technology.
Great. Thanks, John. And thanks for the whole panel for your comments and participation today.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
John, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. What we'll do